Kashiki.
I'm Dylan.
And welcome to the dinner table. We have our first dinner guest, Sir Maxim, who is an Austin-based drag king and activist. So, Sir Maxim, a little bit about yourself.
Yes, of course. Hello, world, everybody in between. I am so happy to be here. I'm so excited. I am a drag performer here in Austin. I've been performing for about, I think, 4 years now. And I go by he, they, he, him, kind of just whatever, and I have a very male persona, technically, whatever, if you consider this male, which I do. And I really love glam rock, male fashion masculinity, and I really try to put that at the forefront of all the art I do, and I love talking about politics. And I have very few people to talk about it with in such detail, so I think it's going to be a yap session for the books.
Absolutely. We've said this to our audience before, we also love talking about politics.
Yeah,
and we have people that we usually talk about politics with in detail, but we're also journalism grads.
Yeah,
so
true.
It's just naturally
You know, I love everyone in the drag community is pretty just by nature has a bit of an activist streak, but you know, it kind of at a certain point, only a few people, you know, watch streamers or read articles or whatever like that, and then only a few people go the extra mile and listen to political podcasts and all the data and everything. And I feel like I'm very much in that little niche group of just obsession with it sometimes. You know what I mean? I think it kind of first occurred around the 2016 election, specifically with Bernie, I think is when I first got interested in all of it. And I've been corrupted since then. So, yeah.
I think that's indicative of a lot of people, is that people want to know, people want to learn more. Yeah. And people do care. But it's just going that extra step and finding the resources and digging deeper. Yeah. And that's what we're here to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I really enjoy the dinner table conversations view of it, or like the kind of angle of like very common sense and I guess, yeah, exactly. Dinner table, like basic stuff, you know, like, cause it can get so, heady, or it feels so like, what's that word when people prevent other people from finding out about stuff? Gridlocked or something, gate kept. Girl bossed. Yeah. And so, yeah, and I feel like any attempt to reverse that and make it accessible to everybody is just doing such a great work. So
I think we'll start off with, what is drag? I think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions of it.
1000%.
That's kind of, I mean, even the lawmakers that are banning drag in Texas.
Even like people that I know who are like part of the community.
Yeah. It's you know, you can ask so many people and get a different answer for everyone. In my opinion, I think it's just any sort of persona or character or gender performance, you know, is drag. And whenever I started out, I knew I didn't want to be a queen necessarily. And I was assigned male at birth. I live as a man, a gay man outside of drag. And so I knew that I didn't want to be a queen. I just didn't know what else there was. And it wasn't until seeing local kind of punk alternative drag in Austin that I realized that it really is just so much more than just a cis man putting on a wig and heels and, you know, female impersonation. I think it makes sense that is the general idea that most people have, because that's such a big transformation, especially, you know, of course, with the RuPaul's Drag Race or just in any sort of movies, everyone loves the delineation of man out of drag, woman in drag, you know, the 180 transformation and stuff, which is the case for many drag performers. But for people like myself, or I think most drag performers, it's somewhere in the middle where, you know, when I'm out of drag, I sometimes still feel like I'm in drag. And when I'm in drag, I kind of feel honestly like very natural like this, and honestly like how this is similar to how I dress out of drag anyway. And so I think when it really comes down to it, it is just character performance, persona performance, and gender performance. I think there's always an aspect of artifice that comes with it, and something larger than life, I think, really is drag. And when we get into definitions like that are so nebulous and are not concrete, I think that's what really scares people, because then they're like, well, if I don't know exactly what you are out of drag or in drag, how do I know how I can control you, or what am I supposed to make of you?
Like, you know, if I can't put you in a box.
Exactly. Yeah. Like how I need to put you in some sort of something. And that, I think, you know, is why drag is so exciting, is that every time you think you have a definition of it, along comes someone, you're like, oh wait, I guess that is kind of it. At first you think it's man dressing up as a woman, then you realize drag kings have been as much a part of the conversation as drag queens have been. For centuries, women out of drag have dressed up as men on stage or in character, things like that. And then suddenly, we have this great genre of new drag, of like monster drag, of like weird characters where it's like, I don't even know if you are a gender or like what you are. And the more the envelope gets pushed, I think it's just a greater expansion of art. And so does that answer your question? Drag is everything.
Yeah. I mean, and I it's interesting that you brought up, centuries, because I think we were doing our research and it is centuries old, right?
Centuries. Crazy.
So tell us a little bit about, like the history of drag and, how it's culturally relevant to the LGBTQ community and the movement.
Of course. Yeah. I know mostly about, 20th century, whenever it really first emerged. And I have a special, I feel like, knowledge of king performances and king drag. A lot of the earliest drag kings weren't even really calling themselves drag kings. Like if we like talk kind of, Middle Ages, I know specifically in parts of Asia that a lot of women would perform as like male characters in some sort of different theater acts and things like that. And at the time, I think it's definitely not even something we would call drag by today's standards, but by those standards, it certainly, I think, hits all the check boxes of what we consider it now, of transformation, of character performance, of something other than yourself. And then specifically in the 20th century, the 1900s, early 1900s, 1920s is kind of where my mind first goes to. A lot of drag kings were women, mostly lesbians, or maybe even people who at the time were trans men or somewhere on the gender spectrum where like they didn't have the vocabulary for it yet. But many of them were like kind of like hosts, and they would like be living as a woman out of drag and then come into the nightclubs and host shows and be on the mic, much more than lip syncing or anything like that, because that really didn't emerge until people could, play music like through, records and things like that. And of course, once that emerged, a lot of people kind of speculate, specifically Sasha Velour in her memoir. I think she has a really wonderful idea of why drag is so important to queer people and how like lip syncing and performance became such a thing. It's because, so many people were excluded from society if you were queer, if you were different at all. And so in these private areas and these private nightclubs, we could go, and I say we as if I was there. So sometimes you read these stories and you're like, I literally know that experience. You go to these clubs and they couldn't be anything outside, so they could create an entire world where they are included inside. So like if the world outside treats me like I'm dirt, like I'm trash, I'm going to go on stage and I'm going to be royalty. Like I'm going to put on clothes and just maybe it's escapism, or maybe it's transformation, or maybe it's therapy, or maybe it's just fun and just playful. And once you kind of think of it like that, it's like, oh yeah, well, I mean, children love to dress up and play characters. Like it's just a human nature to just kind of.
We have an acting industry.
Literally, like, yeah, I mean, like Shakespeare, hello, like people. I think that's whenever you really see it become such like a mainstay. I think probably mid 20th century, then of course, especially 50s, 60s, then Stonewall 70s, 80s, and beyond. But with lip syncing, I think especially was where people would impersonate celebrities, and I think that's where people kind of maybe get it mixed up with celebrity impersonation, female impersonation, because you specifically had so many prominent men putting on drag and becoming gorgeous drag queens, performing as these like characters they love in these movies, or these actresses they love, and these people that they could not admire so publicly out in public, but in these private spaces they could just be whoever they wanted to be. And so I think that aspect of transformation and escapism has always been so important to queer people, because we had no choice for so long. And it also, I think, once you realize you can harness that power of transformation and escapism, it's no wonder that it just becomes something you want to do all the time. That's just something that you just love. And since queer people already exist outside of the heteronormative world, we might as well just, put it into overdrive and dress up as people we aren't even, and expand what we think about drag. And with all of that in mind, you really kind of get the idea of why Queen Mother RuPaul does say we're all born naked and the rest is drag, because it's like, oh yeah, I guess everything is
that's a very accurate statement, I think.
Completely, yeah.
And like I really like that you said when you were talking about the history, just going back when you said that, it wasn't considered drag at that point and or to today's standards. And I think a lot of people will make that argument when talking against drag or talking against any LGBTQ movements. Things evolve, right?
Right.
Wording evolves. I think
Completely.
wording evolves in years, right?
Yeah.
And so there's always new ways to express yourselves. And I think it's really, really important that people have an outlet to do that.
Completely.
And so, kind of switching gears, really. I mean, as we say, having the freedom of expression, we are seeing less and less of that now.
Yeah.
Especially within Texas. And so the Texas drag ban happened a few weeks ago. And so for people who don't know, the Texas drag ban was technically the law was passed in 2023, but there was a lawsuit ongoing for 3 years and they're still ongoing.
Yeah.
And the wording, the language with the actual law being passed and by the federal court is really wonky. It's really
so weird. Yeah.
It's very vague.
Yeah, because this phrasing is so bizarre. I also had to write it down. It was like if a minor could at all be exposed to anything where it was like actual contact or simulated contact between one person or another person's quote buttocks, breast, or any part of the genitals. Right. love how they just got that one in there. It also has to quote appeal to the art that is against the law would have to appeal to the quote prurient interest in sex. Prurient interest in sex. That has been the word heard around the world the past 3 years in Texas, like prurient interest, because I believe originally the very first draft, whenever we first all went to the Capitol in 2023 to speak against it, mentioned cross-dressing, I think is what it was. Like if someone dresses up as the opposite gender, and then of course Bridget Bandit, my drag mother and Texas's drag mother, made the great argument of like, well, and this also applies to myself, like she is assigned female at birth but performs as a queen. I'm assigned male at birth and perform as a king, a man, like as my character. Technically, these laws wouldn't affect us if it was about cross-dressing, So then they were like, oh crap, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Our scapegoating didn't work.
You don't know anything.
Yeah, literally, and that just goes to show like that is what so many people think it is, just cross-dressing and with some sort of sexual, leaning to it. Because I think as we see with, shout out Christy Noem's husband, it's like so many people in that field in the conservative world who just are so far removed from the queer world, any form of cross-dressing or any form of that is inherently sexual to them, any type of that. And so they're like, well, if you're doing it around kids, you must have some sort of perverted blah, 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 whatever. And they just can't comprehend
the irony of that.
So,
right.
The irony, and they say every accusation is a confession. I mean, hello. But yeah, so I think that bill is the main one that really got this conversation going the past few years.
Yeah. And I mean, even further, I was looking it up yesterday. There were 222 bills/laws introduced against the LGBTQ community in the 89th legislative session, which was in 2025. Yeah. There were 48 for the LGBTQ community, out of which one was passed into law. And I'm not going to get into all of them, obviously, but what are your thoughts on that many bills and laws being passed or introduced even?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and I know this is something we will definitely continue to talk about this whole conversation, but just the scapegoating is plain as we can see. You know what I mean? And it almost feels redundant to talk about this sometimes because it feels like it just constantly comes up in history all the time. But I mean, they the way I think of it is like gay people, just specifically like men who have sex with men, was such a hot debate. Oh my God, keep them away from children in the 70s, with Anita Bryant, whatever. Time goes by, things happen. The community accepts gay people more often. And then they're like, okay, we have to move on to something else, and then they solve their abortion issue with Dobbs overturning Roe v. Wade. So they're like, okay, we can't really, we're done with abortion. America likes gay people too much. Let's just go to trans people. You know what I mean? Like, let's go to this niche group. And instead of focusing, on homelessness or infrastructure or public school funding or gun violence or whatever, they exactly. They just have, they being specifically conservatives, but honestly, many political figures in general on both sides know that this is a very good topic that gets people riled up, because they always have a great way of bringing in the children about it. You know what I mean? Like, think of the children. And it becomes like a moral panic. And I think just moral panics thrive in times of fear and just instability, specifically with the economy. And so I think it's no wonder that specifically, after COVID, which put us all into this kind of weird funk and totally hit the economy in such a bad way. And then, of course, inflation with everything, like everyone's so terrified, they just need someone to blame. And that's exactly where power-hungry politicians come in and say, we know exactly what to do here. This is what we live for. We need to find a group of people who are ready to point the finger. And they just chose this time around to go for queer people. Right. In trans people, queer people, gay people. And it's really a bummer, because it just feels like same old thing. It feels so 70s to me. And I love the 70s. Hey, so but this is not the part of the 70s I wanted to go back to. Right. And so it's unfortunately not surprising at all to me. And it's just surprising that it continues to work.
And I think I really like that you mentioned that it was conservative lawmakers, but also just lawmakers in general. And I think that's what we are really aiming to emphasize in this podcast. This is not like a follow what Trump does podcast.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This is not a left versus right podcast either. This is an educational thing, right? We're trying to educate voters. We're trying to educate people about issues that will directly impact them, regardless of their identity, regardless of their communities. And honestly, it sucks to say, but none of them are on our side.
I know. It's like, oh man,
it's really hopeless. It's really hopeless.
Right. Yeah. I think it's easy, to feel really hopeless, and that's why I think it's great that you guys are doing this at all. I think we talked whenever we first discussed this that there is just an oversaturation of I think one, nihilism for sure, and also a lot of podcast bros talking about maybe one former wrestler. What did he do? Fear Factor host Joe Rogan. He's like a WWE something. I don't know. But in general, just more voices, I think, just talking about issues from any single angle, I think is just great. You know what I mean? Because I think we have a lot of very well-funded people who are, I would say it's, I kind of feel like, are on the opposition, it feels, who don't care about these issues and who are very loud voices, out in the vibe. So I think it's just a really great initiative that you guys are striving for. So
I mean, and that kind of leads us to our second section, which is, why should other people care about LGBTQ issues?
Yeah. One, I think, caring about other humans is great, and caring about anyone is very nice. But I also understand that with the way that these narratives are spun, I think someone who considers himself a very kind, good person will unknowingly be, I honestly kind of feel like brainwashed into thinking that queer people are dangerous. We're like, oh my gosh, yeah, like I watch the news and I trust it. Not me, but this character. I watch the news and I trust what these people are saying, and they're saying that children, are being brainwashed or indoctrinated or whatever, And so I really feel for those people who think they're doing the right thing and don't realize that, there are these big, well-funded narratives that are trying to convince you that queer people, trans people, drag performers are the problem, so that it can, make you look away from the actual issues of homelessness, affordability, education, human rights. And so specifically, I think of it all as a very slippery slope. Like, first, trans people, and if they win on this issue, if they get everything they want, all the bad bills passed and all the restrictions possible, then they just know that they can move on to gay people. You know what I mean? And then any control over how someone lives their life can affect us very slowly, as we saw with the Dobbs case overturning Roe v. Wade. It's like they're not just going to stop, with trans people, because as we saw with Project 2025, which is crazy. It's just crazy that I remember we once talked about that issue as something we had to vote against, avoid, and which is now I feel such a reality that it is a clear pathway to all control through white supremacy and patriarchy, and it all starts with the people who I think fight back against that system the most. And I think trans people specifically exhibit such a clear example of how you don't have to exist within the binary of male female, or how you don't have to exist in the heteronormative world, and that annoys and angers and terrifies people who are in control, and anyone who wants to crack down on people just living their honest life. And so clearly I think it's a free speech issue. You know what I mean? And that was the argument that Bridget made with the original fight against SB 12, which is the drag ban going on right now, that it was recently put into effect in March. She made the argument of like, look, this is my free speech to do this, to express myself this way. It is my free speech, and the judge ruled in her favor. The federal court ruled in Bridget's favor, along with extragrams, I believe, in the ACLU of Texas. And I think that is just the heart of it, because if they can stop the expression of someone living their life, which is free speech, if they can show that, like, just how much more can they censor your free speech? First this, and then next, I really do think it's a slippery slope like that. And so if anyone thinks like they're safe, it's that poem you see everyone pass around all the time. First they came for the socialists. I said nothing because I wasn't a socialist. And I think we see this happen time and time again. As for example, the first group that the Nazis went after, once they really got a hold of power, after Jewish people, was the trans community at the time, and they weren't really even using the word trans, I believe, at the time. But all this academic work and medical work on gender studies and sexuality and things was all just completely burned by the Nazis, because I think it's clear they said, well, they are tainting our society, they are corrupting children, and they are making it all incredibly immoral. And then of course we all know how that ended. And I think it's a clear blueprint of that. It's like not even funny, like how they are just
the language,
the exact same words.
And I'm glad you brought up education and healthcare,
because I worked on the data project with all of the anti-LGBTQ laws in the country last year. And when I sorted them in just Texas in general, the most laws were regarding education. So it was stuff like blocking students from their gender expression, different names, and the bathrooms and everything. Yeah. And it's so interesting to me. What boggles my mind the most is the fact that technically it's this is such a small group. And
such a small group.
The whole society of America, not all these numbers, and yet they're targeting us the most. And I think part of it is because we are the most vocal, we are loudest about
completely
it.
Yeah. And they know that because we are such a small group, I think it's easier to rally a lot of people against that, because they know maybe not everyone knows a trans person if they're out, or at least they don't know an out trans person, you know what I mean? They don't know an out queer person. That is such a good point too, especially because I think, what was it, Texas Tech, or just this past week said that students cannot write about LGBTQ issues. There's can't even write about it. It's insane. All these institutions that pride themselves on education and knowledge is power, and what happens here changes the world for the worse. You know what I mean? And it is just so bizarre that it's clear if you are restricting that, if you're restricting education for people learning about this thing, it's clear that you don't want people to find out about it, because you are afraid of what they might do when they have that knowledge. You know what I mean? And so yeah, it's a really, really, really big bummer to see.
I think a lot of this conversation is going to keep circling back to the fact that people don't realize that just because we're being targeted doesn't mean that they're not going to be next.
Completely. Yeah. And I think as we see with the abortion discussion, and just the way that those rights have completely tanked, once they kind of get into expression, that becomes healthcare. That's private life. We all know that the idea of children receiving hormone blockers or testosterone or estrogen anything like that. Any sort of therapy like that is a very hot button issue. You know what I mean? And so it's like, if random people in suits way in the Capitol can control how children are living their lives, how children are expressing themselves, how doctors are prescribing things or not prescribing things, like once they get their foot in the door being able to do that, like who knows what else they can do? You know what I mean? Like, and we even see that, I think parts of Project 2025 talk about banning condoms, talk about like, you know, these very crazy things where it's like any sort of contraception, you know, is like bad, because any sort of sex that does not reproduce, you know, gorgeous sterling white babies, you know, should not be. Exactly. And so it's like, it feels, you know, to the average person like, oh, well, that's a stretch, you're exaggerating, whatever. But like, it's all written in these plans.
That's how it escalates, right? Yeah. I talk to my parents about this all the time. It's like, I think like a middle class person in the United States and a lot of places is very complacent, right? Yeah. And they will use our complacency as a weapon because it's like, oh, what can I do? Or it is what it is. But it shouldn't be what it is, right? And I think we've seen that. Like, there is more, and that's why I think I will always bring him up. This is why, this is how, like, the Mamdani election, like, really.
Let's bring him up. Love him.
Oh my God. It started there and it changed the world.
Spirit. Yes, literally.
It really did, though.
His spirit. Oh my God, I can feel him in this.
And I think even more and I think even more than just, you know, his campaign strategies and his background and everything, it really helps that he's delivered or has tried his best to deliver every single thing that he's campaigned for, right? And that's why his own party, so to speak, was pushing back against him so much, right? Yeah. It's because he was redirecting the conversation. And I think we as Texans are so lucky at this point to have our own, I wouldn't say our own Mamdani because, you know, he's his own person.
Yeah.
But
mini Mamdani. Mamdani light.
He's a piece of hope for us.
I agree.
We desperately need it.
Who is, for the people who don't know,
right.
James Tallarico. Yeah. James Tallarico, who is
our short king. He's like
5'7".
Yeah. Well, I guess it's not. I said short king at a rally, and the person behind me was like 5'7" is not short or something. And I was like,
was that another short king?
Yeah.
It's not the average number. Technically it is.
Yeah, and I had to look down at this person. No, but
and just for people who aren't aware, but James Tallarico is the official Democratic candidate for the Texas Senator election. You know, the reason that we have the insulin is capped at $25 is because of James Tallarico.
Thank you, James. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think it's important to show what you've done, right? It's important to like put your money where your mouth is, right? Yeah. So he's had a long-standing history of doing a lot of good things. Of course, there's things that he can improve on, which everyone can do that, right? But a lot of the establishment leaders are scared that the establishment is falling apart in the eyes of the regular people, right? Because of people like James Tallarico or Zoran Mamdani, because they are redirecting the conversation from right versus left to up versus down.
1000%. Yeah. I love all of that, because I think maybe it was AOC who one time said in some random interview, I think about it all the time, was, you know, people fear that something is falling apart. I think she was talking about like the American empire kind of as an idea. But she was like, you know, maybe whatever is falling apart needs to fall apart so that something better can grow from it. And I honestly kind of feel that way about the Democratic establishment right now. Like, I think we saw time and time again, we are done. I think the average person, especially our age, kind of already considers the Democratic establishment to be a non-person. Like, not even
we're older Gen Z.
Yeah, right.
We're not baby Gen Z, just to be clear.
Exactly. Are you all like 26?
No.
I'm 24.
I'm so old. 26. But yes, I really love James. I love the way that Zoran is so public about all of this stuff, like on social media. He's like, we did this, because he knows all of us are on our phones. Right. All of us are obsessed with like social media. And if he matches us there, and I think Donald Trump knew that, like Republicans
I was just about
knew
to
that.
say that. It's like that. The one thing that Trump did very, very smartly was he was a public president.
Yeah.
Right.
Extremely.
He was on Twitter day after day. I mean, this is so random. Yeah. I don't know if you guys remember this, but this is 2010 when the Twilight series was happening.
Did he tweet about it? Like, was he like?
Oh yeah.
Was it about like her performance or something like that?
He tweeted about his hatred for Kristen Stewart.
Yes.
And then I think he also tweeted about the scandal of Kristen Stewart cheating on Robert Pattinson.
Amazing. That's why everyone says they wish he was like a celebrity gossip like person.
He was.
Yeah.
He was, right?
Like, yeah.
He was doing cameos in movies.
Yeah.
Like calling people who support Republicans stupid.
Yeah.
Like again, I think it's a really his campaign team and himself, they were very smart, especially in 2016.
Yeah.
Right? They harbored his love for Twitter.
Yeah.
And made it into his campaign. And then Zoran and James both, they did the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Is you have to be public because you are for the public, so they should be knowing what you're doing.
In this time and age, we should be able to see it because it's like if it's right there on your phone, like in your hand.
It's very like Trump's public just persona very much gave like fireside chats. Like at the time, it's like people felt like they knew him, he was their friend, blah blah blah, and it completely. And like he sunk his teeth into that and still does it. You know what I mean? Even though he's like slowly decaying and melting away right in front of our eyes. Like, and so I think Zoran gets it. Like he gets it because also he's 33 or something. Like he's
peak millennial.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you see some of the press interviews he'll do? Like he'll make these like millennial references, and I'm like,
he made an entire speech with autotune.
Love it. Yeah. And
it's very authentic because like he's not forcing it. And the reason that it's authentic for both James and Zoran is because they have actions to back up their statements.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing is like, I'm being silly talking about Mario Kart, but he's also doing the work.
Yeah. 67,000 holes filled or whatever.
100,000
The holes filled. Oh my, amazing.
They did something with that.
Literally. Exactly. And also, very, very simple stuff like that. I think very like populist stuff like that, like economy stuff. And
that's what a mayor is supposed to do.
Literally. Yeah. He's such like an old fashioned like mayor, like filling potholes. Like what everyone's like asking him, like, do you believe in Irish independence or whatever? And he's like,
well,
I never. It's like, well, I guess I have to go find an opinion about that and call me in 24 hours or something like that.
He's really good at like redirecting and focusing on.
He stays on message.
Yes. And so I feel like, especially how we saw, I think it was Obama the other day, with Zoran, with the kids reading to the kids.
Asking them what their first name.
Yes, yeah. His name is Mayor. That to me, I really hope that signals that they get it. That's like, okay, we get it. We're done resisting. Y'all want this, like, to put like liberal King Obama with like Gen Z, like dim socialist kings or Mamdani. I really feel like that was a very hopeful sign to me. That, okay, you know what? I think this can convince a lot of people who, for some reason, thought that he was going to, destroy New York City or something like that for whatever reason.
Definitely connecting different generations.
Completely, yeah. And so I think we have a very similar figure with James Tallarico here.
Which
and
Obama endorsed him too.
Exactly, yeah. And, he's raised a whole lot of money. I think he went on, Stephen Colbert and And I really like him. With Beto, I remember seeing him speak in college. I remember liking him too, but I just feel like James has more of like has more actionable history and track record. You know what I mean? And he kind of just feels very very Texan and very like kind of like milquetoast in a very like way that I think can appeal to a lot of people.
And he's an educator. My sister, she's a band director, she's a music educator, and so she really feels that connection with him. She's like, I like him because I know that he has experienced the same things that I have experienced.
Yes.
She's very like, she's like, James.
Yeah, I love the messaging, the top versus bottom, and also how much he brings up God and Jesus and love, how he loves trans kids, and how he says. I think
that's really important. Because religion is a big factor for so many Texans, right?
Completely.
Especially, and I think, I remember we took a class together our senior year at UT for one of our professors, Dr. Anita Varma.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we took an ethics class with her for journalism, and that was during the midterms, or that was during the 2024 elections.
Oh my God.
Dark spot.
But I think after the day after the elections happened, we were analyzing a few different things. And one of the articles that we were analyzing talked about how Democrats specifically misrepresented the Latino vote and how they really only relied on polls and they really didn't go out there and advocate their causes to Latinos and to immigrants. And they really just lumped everyone together.
Yeah.
And I think that Tallarico has done a really, really good job of meeting people where they're at, because what does Latino vote mean?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, like I feel like that is so Democratic establishment of just like category, poll number, like that it's all spreadsheets.
Even answers polls.
Yeah, literally never been approached in my life. I want to answer the poll. I want to be polled. I love a poll. Yeah. So I really enjoy James Tallarico, and I think he did that Jubilee. I think he did the Jubilee thing, or was that Pete Buttigieg? I think it was both. Yeah.
No, but he did go on.
Yes.
And I think he
brave.
Oh
my God.
He also went on Joe Rogan.
Den. He did go on Joe Rogan, and Rogan said he liked him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Smart move.
Which is the thing, Kamala didn't do, and
and I think because so many people really hate the whole middleman, middle vote or swing vote term. They really hate that. But in Texas, where it's just so neck and neck, and it's been neck and neck for the last 8 years, it's really important to get that swing vote. And like we were, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, right? It's the intersections for the LGBTQ community, and like everything is intersecting.
Yeah,
right? Everything is interconnected. And I think that's what James Tallarico has really been advocating for.
Yeah, I especially love how anytime I've seen him try to, whenever someone tries to goad him into talking about trans kids in sports or just any sort of thing like that, he's like, I'm not really concerned about that. I'm more concerned about affordability, and then all the things that people actually care about. And I think that's great, because I think to even take part in the conversation with anyone who is trying to goad you into that is to lose, because whenever you're answering one of their questions, you're already answering it in a framing that they want. It's like, so do you think that trans kids should be in these sports, or do you think men should be in women's sports, or blah 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 blah? It's like, I'm not even going to entertain that, because also that's not reality. Like, that is not the way the world works. The way the world works is, sure, okay, like, yeah, maybe this kid who was assigned this gender at birth or whatever plays on this sport, but also when they go home they can't afford to eat, or their car is broken down, their insurance or whatever, like they have a job, they have to work 2 jobs, their parents have to work 2 jobs. It's like they just totally get they want us to just have blinders on and only focus on like this one aspect of someone's life, when in reality every trans person is still a person who has to pay rent or get around, work a job, get healthcare and stuff. And it's a bummer that Democrats have fumbled with that so much, because I think they kind of a little bit like don't want to get canceled or whatever, so they don't want to speak too much on it, they don't want to stumble the words or whatever. And as we saw with Kamala Harris, she actually didn't speak about it at all, and the Republicans still turn the narrative on her of like, Kamala's for they them, Trump is for you or whatever. And it's like
I remember.
Yes, bullshit. And it's like you just can't win if you are letting them steer the conversation in whatever direction. So it's like,
again, like, so on excuse to stay on message.
Yeah,
right?
Stay on message. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm really very hopeful about James Tallarico. And even if whatever happens with the midterms, I think it's just a great candidate that we have on our hands, and I think is a great future. And so I really enjoy him.
Besides James Tallarico, are there other candidates on the ballot or any specific people in Texas politics that you find to be inspiring or promising, and who are not?
Yeah, right now I really have just been focused on Tallarico. I went to a couple of his events. I've seen him speak, and I really enjoy that he is very aligned with what's her name running for governor?
Gina knows.
Yes, Gina. Yes, yeah. She spoke at the Ice Out rally that I went to, I think about 2 or 3 months ago. She and James both spoke, and I enjoyed their pairing together, because I feel that they have a very similar message, in that I think Gina is very like when she was speaking, she was like numbers. Like, she was talking about businesses. She was talking about like BlackRock, I think was the company that yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. That. And I really enjoy her as well, because I think she and James have a good way of being very like pragmatic, and because I think the way a lot of Democratic establishment politicians want to appeal to young people and queer people is they talk about it in like abstracts. Like, I love gay people. I love trans people. Or like, trans people deserve have space in our society.
It's like,
it's like, okay, like, and like, you know, and I think people are just very tired on both sides of very abstract statements like that, because that feels kind of like the epitome of like a politician, you know. And when I saw Gina speak and James speak, it was like, you know, some of the classic, you know, some speech politician like talking points and stuff, but they both really pulled out numbers, what they would do with bills. Like she was like, day one that I'm there, you know, we're going to pass a bill that, you know, stops businesses from like private equity from buying up houses. And it's very like, I was like, oh yeah, like I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, yeah, but, and I like that. I think that's kind of like the pragmatic in me. I consider myself, when it comes to greater politics, probably Democratic Socialist vibe. And so people like that, people kind of like Tom Steyer in California right now, and then Abdul El Sayed, I believe, in Michigan, and of course Zoran.
He's all over.
He is everywhere.
He's all over Instagram.
Yeah, he's
any videos I see, he's been reposting them.
Yes, yeah. And so I think a lot of people like that who are very less abstract and more very concrete with how they talk is really how you appeal to people, because at the end of the day, money and its safety, affordability, and stuff is the only, I think, how people really vote when they're staring at that ballot. You know,
I'm really glad you brought up, you know, Zoe, because the other day me and Kashika were talking. We're kind of like, we feel like we haven't heard that much from her, or as much from her as other politicians like Tallarico. And so I feel very happy to hear that like you went to an event that she was at. She was saying things that you're like, yes, I agree with, and like you feel that she's very promising.
Yes, 1000%. And you know, with Mamdani, he had like the rent freeze, and he had the grocery stores, and he had like very concrete things, the potholes and everything like that. And that again, very clear, specific things. Like people,
things like he was listening, right?
Yes, yeah.
And I think it's in the same breath, like for Tallarico, he was focused on taxing the billionaires, and he's focused on affordable healthcare. He's for affordability in general, immigration. I've seen so many conservatives saying that they're going to vote for him, because I think that is, again, like that's the point of our podcast too. There's a lack of accessibility, right? I mean, we had to do hours and days of research to even get to the point of this pod, right?
Yeah.
Of this episode. And I think the person who has a 10, 15 hour workday, like they can't come back, and with unreliable internet and like
exactly. And they're not going to like, you know, they see a headline, they're just going to read whatever Spitfire headline it is, and whatever, you know, very divisive headline it is. And they're not going to like click on it and then pay for the subscription to the New York Times or the Guardian or something like that. And like, also, you know, when you read these articles, so much context, you're like, I'm not in this conversation. I don't really get it. And, you know, you hear the buzzwords, you know, trans kids, hormones, brainwashing, blah, blah, blah. You're like, well, I made up my mind, you know what I mean? And then you go make dinner, and then you go help your kid with your homework. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to like, you know, we are crazy and we love politics and we love reading about all this. But, you know, it is still, I have to remember all the time, most people don't dress up in drag and talk about politics with their friends all the time. And so I think, Mamdani, it's very breaking it down, very simple messaging. James Tallarico, it's not left versus right, up versus down, you know, like however many trans kids, it doesn't matter because I can't pay my bills, you know, tonight. And it's just, one thing I have really been thinking about since the election is the term identity politics. And I think trans issues, queer issues, etc., can often be cast aside as an identity politics. You know, you see all these pundits saying Democrats lose because of identity politics, blah, 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 blah. And I think that is another great example of the way that conservatives and the right and people who really want to control other people's bodies and the narrative have taken this conversation and weaponized it to their benefit. Because honestly, in terms of identity, I rarely hear anyone talk about their identity more than like J.D. Vance, like a white Christian man, or more than, you know, Stephen Miller and Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson, like all these people, you know. And the truth is, identity matters to all of us, because in a perfect world, I wouldn't really even have politicians talking about trans people at all. They'd just be like, you know, whatever, you can go do what you want with your healthcare. That's it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need them in my life talking about how I express my gender, you know? But it feels like we have to have these conversations because they are making it a bigger deal than it has to be.
We've talked so much about so many different topics, right? But we have to bring it back to a very important election that's coming up, the midterms.
Yes.
So what is your message to our audience and to voters, non-voters, things that they should remember for the midterm election?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, right now a lot is at stake. And politics is, I think of it much like capitalism, much like the world we live in. It is a game when it comes down to things like this. And so I am not really, I would say, like a Democrat, more Democrat socialist, I would say. But I would just say vote right now for people who can get things done that can help all of us. You know what I mean? Very common sense, actual things. These candidates are not perfect by any means, but I think voting at all will show them that we are angry and we are listening. And voting is not where it starts and not where it ends. You know what I mean? That is just one part of the larger work that we all do all the time. And I think it's stuff like this, podcasts, and just talking and being fucking annoying and loud about what things that we care about, because it's the only way anything is going to change.
The runoffs are coming up in May 26th. So make sure that you go out to vote in that. And also make sure to go out and vote in November.
Mm-hmm. Blu-ray, baby.
That is all we have for this podcast episode. Thank you so much, Sir Maxim, for coming and talking to us. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye. On Dinner Table Conversations.
Bye.
See ya.